for you.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a minute. But just as a reminder, we have a couple of Darrel's books here. The first one, which was my introduction to Dr. Darrel Ray, is The God Virus: How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture. And you want to give like a quickie synopsis for those who aren't familiar?
The quickie synopsis is: don't get infected with religion.
Boom.
It's a parasite, and it'll take over your life if you're not careful.
And the second book, which actually spawned the Secular Sexuality Show, among other things, is right. Sex and God: How Religion Distorts Sexuality. And for years, I mean, we've known each other for more than...
Going clear back to like 2010 at least.
Yeah, it's more than a decade at this point. Well, what year did The God Virus come out?
2009.
Okay, because we met right around then.
Within a month or two after that came out, I was on the show, for the first time.
This one, though, this is fun. So we were actually talking before the show about a number of things, and there's a few things we want to get into before we start taking callers. Specifically, Darrel's not only written a couple books, but started Recovering from Religion Organization, the Secular Therapist Project. And I remember at Apostacon, probably 10 years ago, you and I were sitting there, and I think Marlene Winnell was there. And,
right.
You were talking about the very beginnings of starting, hey, here's what we're going to do, and we're so excited and everything else. And now Recovering from Religion has grown. It's probably the single most valuable resource that we recommend on a regular basis because people are calling in, and you guys have set up a way for them to have a hotline to call into people, online discussions, counselors, and moving on to the Secular Therapist Project for people who have issues that go beyond just, hey, I need somebody to talk to, where they're going to get good science-based treatment.
Right. And it's grown massively. We have almost 19,000 registered clients on the Secular Therapy Project and 422 certified, registered, vetted therapists on the Secular Therapy Project side. And we have about 118 volunteers.
And you've got a new...
For Recovery from Religion alone.
You just announced a new executive director for Secular Therapist Project?
Yes, Dr. Eric Sprankle.
Right.
You may see him on Twitter. He's got a pretty big Twitter presence. But he's our new director. And we've expanded the Secular Therapy Project. We literally doubled the size of the leadership team because we're going to be doing a couple things. And this is really interesting stuff. First, we got a new director for international outreach. And the second is we got a new director for academic outreach. And the cool thing about the academic outreach is right now there's a hell of a lot of religious schools graduating therapists with religious ideas about LGBTQ, for example. And we're going to be fucking challenging these people. We are not going to let therapists get graduated and get licensed. We're going to start challenging states for licensing people who are getting graduated from places like Pat Robertson's University.
Yeah.
You can go there and get a year of Pat Robertson theologies that says God sends hurricanes to Orlando for the gays. And that is wrong. People should not be subjected to that. And also, conversion therapy. There are states where that's not illegal, and therapists can actually refer to that. And it's unethical as hell.
I'm pretty much of the opinion that you shouldn't be able to become a licensed therapist, counselor, psychologist, etc., unless you also have some grounding in science-based therapy and particularly training in how to deal with secular patients, because you're going to find a lot of counselors who don't seem to know much else besides, well, how's your spiritual life? How is your have you talked to your preacher? Have you talked to your priest? Have you talked to your mom or your rabbi? And because it's not even necessarily these individuals are extremely religious or proselytizing or anything else. It's become so much a part of our culture.
It is, right.
Oh, well, spirituality is a component of the human experience, so we need to address that in order to address the whole person.
Right.
And yet there are people
who when I hear that, I say, oh, you mean superstition is a part of your worldview and your model of reality?
I mean, if you went into a therapist and they ask you, well, I realize that you're going through a lot right now. Did you happen to break a mirror in the last couple of years? You would walk out. And yet we allow the other stuff. And it's not so much that sort of thing necessarily shouldn't be allowed, although I have my views on it. It's just if we fail to address secular people, the people who are not superstitious, who don't believe in the supernatural, and we just try to shovel, more religion or woo on them, I don't know how we can do that treatment.
And you can't. If you never challenge the ideas that got the person to the problem in the first place, then you're never going to help them get out of the problem.
Well, speaking of the thing that might get them to the problem in the first place, let's talk a little bit about religious trauma syndrome.
Okay. Yeah. So what I want to try to get out to the public at this point in time, part of the reason I'm on here is talk about how does religion cause trauma, and I'm not talking about your run-of-the-mill mainstream Episcopalians or Quakers or whatever. I mean, I'm talking about the main body of evangelicals, for example, or Islamic religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons. Those kinds of religions are incredibly restrictive, and as a result, they put ideas into people's heads that ultimately cause them problems in life, which then are explained by, well, that's the devil talking to you, or other things. And I'm here to say that religion causes traumatic experiences in children primarily, and when it does that, adults grow out of those children and become victims of a trauma that we now are calling religious trauma. Now, there's another term that I want to distinguish here today, and that's religious trauma syndrome. That's a little different, but to do that, I want to go back and just say, we all agree that there is such a thing as PTSD.
Right.
Nobody disagrees with that, but we used to disagree with it. Years ago, we called it shell shock, or we called it cowardice, or we called it battle fatigue in the war side of it, and we didn't recognize that it was a real neurological issue. And we said the same thing for years to women about rape trauma, that, well, it's all in your head, you should get over it, kind of bullshit. Well, the same thing has happened with religion. War and rape, we now understand, cause real neurological changes in people. We also need to acknowledge religion does the same thing. And unfortunately, war and sexual trauma can be wrapped up into religion, of course, for sure. So that's kind of been my passion of recent, right? And as a result of that, can I mention the conference that's coming up? Is this the time to do it? As a result of that, Dr. Marlene Winnell came out with a term about 10 years ago called religious trauma syndrome. And recently we decided this is a damn good idea to start talking about this out loud. And a woman, Janice Selby, a therapist up in Vancouver, has decided she's going to put on a conference on religious trauma.
Right.
And Secular Therapy Project is going to be one of the two main sponsors. Dr. Winnell's Journey Free organization and our organization, Secular Therapy Project, we are going to be talking out loud at the conference for 2 days about this. And our goal is to get this on the map. We know there's PTSD. What nobody wants to talk about is how does a religion screw up people's lives?
Yeah.
And we know this. You and I are both atheists. We see how much damage religion does. But the new thing, or the thing I think is unique, is we now have a label for it. Mm. And we've probably seen this. I saw this 30 years ago in my practice. I didn't know how to label it. Well, now I know how to label it. I know that when somebody comes to me complaining about fear of hell, I can't go to sleep at night because I wake up with fear of hell, I know that's probably religious trauma. I would not have called that name 20 years ago, but now I've got a name for it. As we know, if we can name something, then we can start doing something about it, or at least working on it. And that's why we're having the conference. And by the way, but whether we have a conference or not, I want people to start thinking in terms of religious trauma. Have you been affected by religion? And has it traumatized you in your sexuality, and your ability to have relationships with other people, your ability to sleep at night, your ability to have a social relationship? I mean, when you leave religion, that's when you're most likely to experience religious trauma, because your family will cut you off, your friends will cut you off, you might lose your job. I mean, there's a lot of things. You might have night terrors based on fear of hell. All those things can happen to somebody. And generally speaking, what we're calling religious trauma happens at the point you leave a religion. You may have been traumatized within the religion, but the religion doesn't let you know that. It's God. You need to pray hard to God, or it's Satan doing this to you. But the minute you step out of that bubble, that's when you have to deal with the real trauma that religion did to you, probably since childhood.
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons, I was mentioning before the show, I mean, I don't suffer from PTSD or any kind of severe effects that I would associate with religious trauma. As a matter of fact, at the time that I found my way out of religion, it was far more freeing. It felt kind of liberating. But it's undeniable that my religious upbringing and the teachings that I was exposed to have had an impact on my life, and in many ways have had a negative impact on my life. Maybe mine isn't as severe as other people's. I don't know whether I would qualify as religious trauma or not, but the fact that there are things in my life which have been detrimentally impacted by religious teachings and the culture that you grow up in, it just means that I'm probably one of the luckier ones.
You are, right.
And you mentioned kind of an informal survey that you had recently done.
Yeah, we did a survey of all of our therapists in the Psychotherapy Project, and not everybody responded. But what we did get gave us some interesting information. What we asked them was, considering all of your client base, not just the ones that come through us, all of your client base, how many people come in with complaints related to religious abuse, like being beaten for having been caught masturbating, or being grounded because you didn't learn your Bible verses, or being shamed for your body, or being gay, or there's any number of things. And we listed it before. And we asked what percentage of your clients come in with those. We call them adverse childhood experiences related to religion.
Right.
Adverse childhood experiences related to religion. 36% of the clients coming in to the people that responded, 36% have those complaints.
Yeah. That's
a third of all the people that walk into any of our therapists' offices. That's a lot of people. Remember, we got 18,000, almost 19,000 clients. If you divide that by roughly a third, you've got 6,000 people with some kind of trauma related to religion.
And no matter what this is a AA survey, and not everybody responded and everything else. There are people out there who are going to be good at statistics and stuff, and they're going to say, "Oh, well, you're only surveying people who came in for counseling."
Yeah,
you're right. And the thing is, that doesn't mean that the number's inaccurate, or doesn't tell you which direction it's inaccurate, because how many other people have suffered for a long time because of religious trauma and don't actually come in for counseling.
Right.
Because religions, of the many things that religions have done that are gross disservice to people, setting up a scenario under which you are responsible for you and your thoughts, and psychology and counseling and these things. You don't need that. What you need is God, and you need Jesus. And they keep people mired in this stuff to where they're not going to actually seek out help and counseling.
Absolutely. I think it's probably an undercount, but I do want to understand. I'm not claiming this is scientific. It wasn't. But it is an interesting finding, and it probably is definitely an undercount. Yeah. As I think you're pointing out, there's a lot of people out there walking around with these problems, and they don't identify them as psychological. They identify them as spiritual.
Yeah,
it's because I haven't prayed to God hard enough, and I can't have a good relationship with my partner because I haven't prayed to God hard enough. My marriage is falling apart. I need to pray harder. Well, no, your marriage is probably falling apart because you've got some crazy ideas about what relationships should be. Males should be over females, or you shouldn't have sex before marriage, or whatever. There's all sorts of crazy ideas. So,
are you saying males shouldn't be over females?
Well, if they want, the female wants top or bottom, I don't care.
Welcome to the next edition of Secular Sexuality. Top and bottom.
Topping. Don't be topping me, though. I don't need topping.
It's a great thing. So by the way, if you want to know just how great of a person Darrel is, last Saturday when I was in Tulsa.
Oh yeah.
I was sitting there at the after event dinner, and a woman was asking me questions about people in the movement, and she asked what I thought of Darrel, and I was like, I love Darrel. He's one of my best friends. And she had kind of a negative experience with the Secular Therapist Project because she had gone to the website and evidently didn't use it correctly and didn't get a response. And I was like, okay, well, let's, I don't want to get, Darrel's going to be at my house next Sunday. He's going to be on the show. I don't want to forget. So I just picked up the phone and called him. And you were at a party with a bunch of Satanists.
Yeah, I was at a Satanic Temple party, yeah.
And so he stopped his activity. I don't know what was going on there, but he paused that.
We had our clothes on.
To talk to this woman and sorted out the whole issue.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I love people who have an interest in getting shit done.
Oh, yeah.
And, definitely we should all be thankful to you and for all of the people that you put together who do such amazing work with Recovering from Religion, Secular Therapist Project. But I value the fact that I can just pick up the phone and say, hey, there's somebody here who's having a problem, and you are Johnny on the spot to try and get it fixed.
Glad I could help her. I want her to get the help she needs.
Yeah. And so on that note, before we start taking calls, as a reminder, you can go ahead, give them the websites, and we have pamphlets. We can't hand you the pamphlets through the screen. We are not yet at Willy Wonka vision level technology. But how do they get in touch with Recovering from Religion, with Secular Therapist Project?
Yeah, go to recoveringfromreligion.org, and there's a massive amount of resources you can use to help. You can hit the chat button and chat with one of our live human beings. We don't have any bots at Recovering from Religion, and we take a lot of pride in having real human beings. We have human beings that will take your call or take your chat from Germany, from Australia, you name it. We can
Should
talk
I be lip syncing right now?
About anybody.
It's like they cut into me while you were talking. I was like, oh, keep going, Darrel. I'll do it.
And you can go to Secular Therapy Project. Be sure you register as a client and then search. It's kind of like Match.com or a dating site. You don't contact the dating site and say, find me a date. You contact the dating site and you create a profile and then you search for a date. And that's kind of how Secular Therapy Project works. You can find a darn good therapist who's well-trained and uses evidence-based therapy. You don't worry about them sending you back to Jesus or thinking you need a better spiritual life or going back to church or any of that kind of stuff if you contact somebody through the Secular Therapy Project. Secular Therapy.